morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet that we share together. Welcome to another episode of the 100 Connected podcast. My name is Annette de Graaf, and I am joined by an incredible group of friends and fellow changemakers who are deeply committed to transforming education. Hello, Hanneke Mackie from Baskets, South Africa.
Has it?
And hello, Sherelle Druppers from Chesa Chesa in Kenya.
Hi, everyone.
And Lindsay Stewart from Sweet Tree Arts in Hope, Maine, the USA.
Hello, hello.
And of course, Alex Shapiro from the 100 headquarters in Helsinki.
Hi, happy to be here as always.
Yes, and together we bring perspectives from around the world, uniting our passion for innovation in learning. Today, we are honored to welcome Naqiya Ebrahim, a 100th global innovator and executive director at Seenaryo, an organization transforming education through theater, storytelling, and play-based learning. Naqiya is the co-creator of the Playkit, a pioneering tool that helps educators and facilitators integrate creative learning into their classrooms. She leads Seenaryo's communications, impact reporting, and finances, and manages the development of the Playkit app. Additionally, she co-designed Seenaryo's training programs and resources for educators, ensuring that play and storytelling are at the heart of learning experiences. With a background in arts and education, Naqiya has held roles as head of impact and evaluation and early years scriptwriter at Now Press Play. I love that name. Performing arts specialist at Artists Education and co-director at Saturday Storytellers in collaboration with Croydon Council. And in 2015, she co-wrote Adventures in Noggle Noggleland, an interactive children's theater production. That sounds so fun. Her work has taken her across the globe, all driven by one mission: to use the arts and play to nurture a generation of curious, collaborative, and critical thinkers. As Naqiya stated during her speech at the 100 Summit in Helsinki, in a world where children are constantly confronted with what they can't control, these creative methods give them back a sense of control, a sense of being heard and seen. Through play, storytelling, and artistic expression, Seenaryo is not just guiding children, but empowering them to shape their own narratives and futures. And we had the privilege of listening to Naqiya's speech at the 100 Summit in Helsinki, and everyone in the crowd was just blown away. You could hear a penny drop by her powerful words and the incredible impact of play, especially for children who have to face challenges we can't even begin to imagine. And I think I was listening the whole time with my eyes as big as saucers and my mouth wide open. And a day later, I was incredibly lucky to sit across from Naqiya during the gala dinner, where I had the chance to learn even more about this inspiring human being. And the evening flew by, and I was left with so many more questions, wanting to listen to her speak for much longer. So you can imagine that I am beyond excited to have her as our guest on the 100 Connected podcast today. So Naqiya, your work with Seenaryo is truly inspiring, and it makes such a difference in the lives of so many children and educators. Can you please take us back to the beginning? So how did your journey with Seenaryo start? So what inspired you to co-create all of this, and what was the vision you had when it all began?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Annette, for that question, and also for that incredibly long and beautiful introduction, which I was not expecting. Well, if I go back to the beginning, firstly, in terms of the kind of what I was trying to address, or what Seenaryo was trying to address, is really the critical gaps in early childhood education in Lebanon and Jordan, and now also because we started working in Palestine, in Palestine as well. I mean, these are regions which are deeply affected by political and economic crises. Lebanon and Jordan, they host the world's highest per capita refugee populations. And this fact hasn't changed in the entire 10 years of my work with Seenaryo. That fact remains the same. And this is straining education systems that are already weakened by economic collapse and instability. I would say, in the last year and a half, the recent regional wars have definitely intensified needs. I remember in a Guardian article that I read last year, Dr. Sama Jabr describes Gazan children as facing, chronic traumatic stress disorder. This is their daily experience. And I would say early childhood education, particularly, has been neglected in the region. It's often seen as unskilled childcare rather than a foundation for development, which I think everyone here knows that's what is so important about early childhood education, that it is giving you those building blocks for your entire future. And the Lebanese government talks about its underqualified and underskilled teaching force as a major challenge. So this was really what the Seenaryo Playkit, which is our innovation, was trying to address, was trying to deal with. If I go even further back, before the innovation was created, our work started very much in community settings, not in schools. And our focus before education was really around addressing the mental health crisis, building 21st century life skills, and challenging polarization, right? Because you have these communities that really don't trust each other. And so challenging polarization through theater. I remember in 2015, our very first project was with a group of Palestinian children in Shatila refugee camp, and they made a play about dinosaurs and an astronomer's daughter, and that's how Seenaryo came to life, making plays, making shows. But a few years into doing this type of work, of creating theater productions, we were invited by a partner to see how we could bring our work from a community setting into a school setting. Um, and I remember when we first went into early schools, we saw 5-year-olds sitting at desks copying from a board. And I think we know that that's not necessarily the best way to learn, particularly at such a young age. And we knew immediately that our participatory theater, play-based approaches could help teachers get really creative in their classrooms, really think about how they're bringing learning to life. And so what we did was we went away and we workshopped with theater makers, with teachers, with education experts to start developing activities that were curriculum linked, yes, but really that were about developing those life skills, developing creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, all of that stuff that we know allows children to thrive and flourish in their futures. And as we were writing all of these activities, what we thought was going to be a sort of short document ended up being an entire book, a book of classroom activities. And that book is how the Playkit started, but we realized quite quickly that if we wanted it to develop regularly and be accessible in multiple countries, that an online platform would be really vital. So that was why we then developed the Playkit app, so that teachers have access to this library of songs, stories, games that they can use to bring learning to life in their classroom. So today, I think I said we train teachers to use the Playkit across Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, but I hope it has the potential to become the leading classroom resource for teachers across the Arab region and beyond.
This is so inspiring, Naqiya. Honestly, I hope you remember from when I saw you at the summit in Helsinki. I came to you and I really felt so validated in the work that I do. Seeing you on a stage like that, seeing myself mirrored back, very emotional to me and very sincerely just like really grateful for you. A lot of what you're doing in South African context, we do quite similarly. And I have 1,000 questions, so I'm going to really try to be fair to my other co-hosts and not take over. But maybe we'll make more opportunity in the future. But one of many questions I have for you is around how, and really I hope that a lot of other people listening and watching might have similar questions. How do you do it just from a technical and a funding perspective? So with my organization, Buzz Kids and the Buzz Foundation, we have very similar ideals and also using it through the arts. And my number one pet peeve and the thing that hurts us so much is we go to funders here in South Africa and we're like, we want to do these arts interventions so that we can develop the 21st century skills. And for the most part, they say, wonderful, yes, get it, absolutely, we've got the research to back it up. And then the answer is usually, but sanitation in South African context now, so this is now different problems, but similar in the sense that if there's no running water, if there's no sanitation, there's no electricity, then we can't get to these beautiful 21st century skills. I recently wrote an article for a paper where I said, of course, these things must be the foundation, food, water, and those things. Of course, but it cannot be the ceiling, because if that's the ceiling, then we never ever catch up with the rest of the world and the wonderful opportunities that the Finnish children have, for instance. And so unless you get funding behind you, then in South African context again, then it remains the children in the private schools and the affluent who get the opportunity to develop these future skills. And so how have you managed to get people to support you? And thank you for doing that just for me personally as a mirror, because you certainly have given me lots and lots of hope. But for me and for others, how have you managed to convince to get funding or to muscle that in whatever magical way? Please share with us so that we can copy and paste.
It's an interesting question and a complex one, and I don't think I have a simple answer. I mean, I think we've been very lucky in terms of finding the right type of funders, right? And finding people who really do value and believe in the arts and in nurturing these types of projects and nurturing these types of skills and who see them as fundamental. I think evidencing impact, which I think you were touching on, is such a tricky thing, and it's definitely something we've chosen to invest a lot of time in thinking about. We're constantly refining the way in which we collect data about our work. Last year, we actually started working with UCL's Institute of Education, and they supported us in refining our suite of evaluation tools. And they're also currently writing a journal article about the Playkit and its impact. So, these kinds of things really help bolster our work when we have academics supporting and helping the world understand why it's valuable. But fundamentally, I imagine, like you, we're not yet at a scale where we can be doing randomized controlled tests and things like that. Funders often want hard data. And while we run studies, we collect feedback, the real proof, I think, is in the classrooms, in the community settings. When you see a child who is disengaged suddenly lighting up through a song, or a teacher who felt stuck now leading a joyful interactive session, I think the value of that is undeniable. I guess my short answer is that we've built credibility through combining both qualitative and quantitative evidence. And yeah, I guess my advice would be, and this is, I don't think I'm an expert on this by any means, but really showing funders the human impact alongside the numbers. Take them into the classroom, take them into the settings that you're working with them, share real stories, and show them the transformation.
Do you still, what I felt very much in Helsinki and in the community was, wow, there seems to be a change. And I think some of us really said this to one another, as much as it's maybe not a tangible thing that we can really at this point say for sure, but it seems to be for me a shift in the consciousness around creativity as a core skill, and the skills around 21st century skills and the value of the arts. And it's an exciting time. I think I'm definitely starting to smell a change. And I hope, yeah, you're definitely an example of that for me.
Well, thank you. And I really hope that you're right about that change. I definitely feel that coming. It's interesting, actually, because on the one side, I feel that coming. On the other side, I see cuts across governments when it comes to the arts, when it comes to well-being. And so I think it's about trying to keep the narrative going in the direction that we want it to, and seeing how we as smaller community-based organizations can actually advocate that at even a government level, so that the narrative isn't only changing, but also the funding landscape is changing.
Absolutely.
I want to pick up on one of the threads you were talking about earlier, which is the effects that it has on teachers. So you mentioned that the young people in Lebanon and Jordan are facing this chronic traumatic stress, but it's not just in a classroom about students. It's very important that these initiatives are also taken up by teachers. And two of the focuses that we've had at HundrED over the last little while is on teacher burnout, but also on how do we prepare the landscape for the kinds of innovations like yours. And since you have shifted to this online play kit, which is really about providing ideas and helping build joy and creativity into the classroom, how do you consider the teacher aspect of it? How do you make sure that these are things that teachers who have been undergoing tremendous stress as well are prepared to do for their own mental well-being, to help them understand what it's going to mean for their students?
It's interesting because I would actually say the fact that it is joyful, the fact that it is creating well-being for children in the classroom, it has that dual effect and dual impact on teachers themselves. I think what's more interesting is the question of buy-in, is how do you convince them of that before they actually try it and get into the classroom? And what we've found is that our training is really important. So yes, we have an app, but that's not the be all and end all. You can't expect to roll out an app without actually getting in a room with people and helping them feel and understand what it is that you're trying to do. And I think our training is very practical. We don't theorize at teachers. We really get them up and moving and playing, and I think they feel joyful. They see themselves how happy and playful the work is, and they want to replicate that in their classrooms. I think that buy-in moment is really crucial because they get behind the idea, and then they also feel confident and equipped to, okay, that worked, that really worked, I can try this now. I've learned how to do it, I'm going to go and try that tomorrow. And actually we do get teachers saying immediately, the week after the training, they're already trying the activities.
I just want to say that the overarching theme that we see in all of the innovations is really that aspect of joy. And from my own time trying to implement new ideas and new pedagogies in the classroom, the power of joy in teacher buy-in cannot be overstated. So I'm really glad to see that it's there.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I'm dying to share an article with you, Naqiya. You probably read it, but actually I was just reading last night about how, back to Hannike's idea of the mirror, this happens. It's like suddenly there's an image that comes into our podcast. Well, I think the mirror is it this time. Well, they were talking about mirror neurons, right? And how emotions are contagious and human brains love to connect, right? And of course, the thing that they were talking about was music. And I loved reading on your innovation page about how your songs increase from like 40 to 94% use in the classroom, and that there's like a daily song, and that I was like just absolutely delighted to read that and recognize that music is this incredible human capacity to connect. But the other thing the article said, which was a great reminder, and a lot of psychologists are talking about this right now, is the idea of rhythm. Okay, so where do you find rhythm that can allow the brain to calm in a trauma setting, move out of the brain stem, begin to shift through all the incredible networks that we have? And it's music that can make that shift, right? I mean, we know these stories about people with Parkinson's who can't walk and suddenly they're listening to music and dancing. There's an incredible, I always use that word, but there's an incredible capacity, I think, for music to be able to shift the brain out of trauma, out of different old patterns. And I think that you're using the arts and play to do a full neuro exercise is at the heart of your work. So my question for you is, in what other ways do you see rhythm in the work of Seenaryo?
Oh, I like an abstract question. Before I answer that, I just want to say how much I wholeheartedly agree about the power of music. I do think music singularly is very special in terms of that feeling of creating bond and creating rhythm and creating a sort of communion between people. And you really see that happening in the settings that we're working in. I don't know if any of you have ever done any singing. But I've when I've been in choirs, just that feeling of the music coming up through your belly and your chest, it's just so amazing. And I think, to answer your question, Lindsay, rhythm is entwined in so much of our work, because the act of singing is rhythmic, but also the act of standing up and doing a story with your class or with your community group is rhythmic in itself, right? There's a texture texture that you're feeling as you're moving around the room and playing together. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers properly, but rhythm is part of the way we move through life, I think.
It's lovely. Thank you.
There's also a hook, right? The hook of how children learn and the power of the music. But, I think it has the same effect on us on kids as a pop song, a great Beyonce track has on us. The way it brings the heart, it activates the heart, and the hook gets you going. And then suddenly the information that's conveyed, if it's an educational song, sits in a whole different part of the brain. It's activated in an entirely different part of the brain. I always like to look at the effect of my own little 5-year-old. And suddenly once it's been a song about the insects, he can't forget that the definition of an insect is antennas and 6 feet because it was in a song. And now it's
Yeah.
hooked. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that comment in.
Yeah. Completely. That memory connection that it creates. I mean, I still remember songs from my own childhood, it's very powerful.
But also making connection with somebody else through music. It is so much more accessible if there's music you can connect through. Using music as like a tool to connect with somebody is way more accessible than having to speak or having to listen to somebody else. Do you have any examples like of how music helped children calm down or be more open or connect better with peers or with educators?
Well, one story I'd like to share is, so in the recent escalation in Lebanon, given everything that was happening, we started delivering Playkit activities live to children who were in shelters, because schools across the country had turned into shelters, which meant that children weren't accessing education. And I mean, it was such a harrowing time for our team and the communities that we worked with. But we were able to reach 700 children, just in that 2-month period through our theatre and Playkit activities, and give them access to the pockets of joy that we've already talked about. And in this one class, we were doing lots of singing and music. One session, I should say, lots of singing and music. They were particularly doing a song about hygiene, because that actually became quite a complicated thing for children in shelters. And this one mother shared this story, and I'm actually going to read it word for word, because I don't want to mess up what she said. I have it here. Awalia used to be very anxious about the strikes and the news, but during your activities, he seemed completely disconnected from the war. Even after coming back to our room, so she means her room in the shelter, his mind stayed focused on what he had done with you and what he had learned. Other mums and I are so impressed with how you've brought laughter and joy to our children's lives. You're truly changing their mood and creating a positive, uplifting environment for them. And, going back to what you were saying, what you were asking, Hanaki, about evidence, I think, that kind of anecdotal evidence is invaluable and often tells you more than anything else.
Couldn't agree more.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's so beautiful to listen to. And I want to ask a question, but also I just want to sit back and listen to you, because kids don't always have words for trauma, and especially I think in the communities that you work in, and I recognize this as well. We use dance, movement, and play, and it's beautiful to see that we don't ask how does a child feel, but we ask a child, how do you feel, and express it in a move. And if you would go around the room right now, every one of us would have a unique move to express how we feel, right? And that's so beautiful that you give an outlet to children. And I love that you touched upon the parent, because I want to understand a little bit more about like the trauma in these families and your work with the children, and how do you bring the parents along on this journey as well, because the kids might have an outlet or an expression, but would come home also to a family where there's a lot of trauma, and that can sometimes create a little friction. Could you share with us how the parents are being taken along on this journey as well?
I'm really happy you've asked this, because it's actually something we are thinking a lot about currently. And I think it's something that we haven't done enough of, because we've been very teacher focused. But you're 100% right that the community and the network around the child is so important. During COVID, I'm sure many of you experienced this as well. You had to really suddenly rely on parents for fulfilling all education needs of children. And what we did at that time was we developed a program called I Learn From Home, where we shared, and it was very lo-fi, and I think actually sometimes the best innovations are lo-fi, where we shared little videos that we sent to parents on WhatsApp, and we had a crazy 98% participation rate from the parents that we shared it with. And we knew this because they were sharing videos back on WhatsApp of what they had done. That was part of the program, as we asked them, we'd show them what to do live with their child, and then they would share it back with us to show how it had gone. And it was such a powerful moment in 2020. We ended up reaching 9,000 families through this program. But actually, since then, I feel very disconnected to parents, and I feel that I feel that we haven't really thought about how we continue working with them and how we continue that relationship. So this year in 2025, we're actually hoping to do a project that works directly with parents of children who are in Playkit schools, so that they're kind of getting this wraparound experience in the classroom and at home, and actually training parents in how they might interact more with their children's education, how they might play with them in their household setting and support their learning and development at home. So you'll have to watch this space, and I'll come back to you in a few months with how that's going.
Wonderful. Well, and we will also be able to share ideas, because I think we're very much alike in our approaches. And why I asked the question is also because we are struggling with this, because we feel parents are such an important part, but how do you reach them? And the thing is, when you start this work, and I think everybody will recognize it, you start with one thing and then you see 500 other things that you would love to do, but you don't have the funding, the resources, the time, the expertise to touch upon everything. But we will definitely keep in touch, and we'll take a close loop on your progress there. So really interested to see what will happen in this space.
In our context in South Africa, with something very similar to the Playkit, with Buzz, we call it Buzz in a Box. We try to onboard the teacher. So I want to understand a little bit more. It's the teacher that, and I agree with what Cheryl's talking around the parent and onboarding the parent as well, and getting the parent on board of what we're doing. And we often find that forums such as even this podcast, and finding opportunities to kind of re-educate, that sounds a little bit arrogant, but you know what I mean? Like sharing with parent what good education and good child development looks like. That in itself, I think, is part of our work here as innovators and change makers, is to help inform more options and what the research speaks about around child development and education. And then back to the sort of question, I guess, that I was trying to ask. I understand correctly that your Playkit is it a tool? It's a tool for the teacher, right?
That's right. Yes.
And so that goes into sort of, I assume, a district, an area, one school that you get onboarded. And the idea is now through the app for that teacher to commit him or herself to to learn more. They get a bit of training, as you say, which is vitally important. We do similarly as we enter into the communities. Do you also find that the cascade of success kind of starts to happen when that teacher starts to kind of really lean into it and fail forward and fail fast? And when we can get those introversions or fears that the adult almost has, more than the child, to be playful, to allow themselves to put the hat of the actor on, and to be, and in our experience with our innovation in South Africa, that's kind of what we are finding. Looking for more advice and wisdom from you in this sense, is that how do you get, especially in the context of so much trauma, so much war, and a particular culture, how do you get that teacher to strip those inhibitions, to be playful, to lean in? And then I guess the follow-up is, over time, does the improvement start to cascade and get even better in terms of the uptake and the result with the child?
I think it's so crucial that you have this regular follow-up, and I think this is something that we're starting to explore. But that deepening of the teacher user journey is something that we really want to get a little bit more concrete, get a little bit more in depth. So right now they have a training, then we go into their classrooms and do classroom observations, and we give them feedback. After that, they do follow-up training. But even that, I think, is quite a short journey, and I want to be exploring it more. So something that we've been talking about setting up this year are teacher communities. And so this is where teachers can really kind of form a peer network where they're talking directly to Seenaryo and kind of sharing their ideas, sharing their tribulations, and kind of troubleshooting with each other, and also getting support from us. I don't think this answers everything, but I think what I'm hoping will happen is that through getting those really engaged teachers who are really wanting to break barriers and push the boundaries of what we're doing, that we'll get a really high level of engagement from them. And then if we're hosting events and stuff for these teacher communities, we're really creating a community of people who are pushing for this work. And I think there's also, Sharelle, you were talking a little bit about capacity and focus. I think there's also an acceptance that has to happen that, of the say nearly 4,000 teachers that we've reached so far, not all of them are going to have that in-depth experience. Not all of them are going to be part of a community that really is doing this every day. And I think recognizing your sphere of influence is really important as an innovator, really recognizing that you will change some people 5%, and you will change, hopefully, another number of people 90%.
Yeah, I have a question about that too, because that's often you're already sharing wonderful examples about building this community and like maybe even an online community, but also an like offline community, which is also really valuable. But what I hear so often is that when you want to make a change and you need all those educators on board, you need the parents on board, that it's so hard to make that change sustainable, to make it last longer than like the excitement of like the first weeks of the first months. And then it just like fades out. Do you have like, an advice for change makers, people like us who have great ideas and we will keep going? We have all the fuel inside of us, right? But do you have other tips, advice for change makers who want to make a long lasting change?
It's very funny, Annette, that you asked me this question because it was actually going to be one of my questions for all of you. Which I suppose is to say that it's something where I'm still trying to figure out. And I think again, it comes back to that idea of acceptance, of knowing that we can make these ripple effects, but that one person, one organization, one innovation can't change the world. But yeah, this thing about how you achieve it all, I'm still struggling.
And I'd like to go back to what you said about how to engage parents. And I think as we sit here and we discuss what we all have come here to discuss, which is children, I want us to acknowledge that they are the change makers. And whenever we are lost for answers and lost for words, they have them every time. And I think we underestimate daily the capacity for children to be able to change their own lives, to be able to influence their parents. If there's one thing that can get a parent to action, it's the child. And so how do we give them today, right now? And you're doing that, Naqiya. It's really wonderful to hear how you're doing that. And I just wonder about even within every design that we do as innovators, how do we center them? How do we listen to them? Not just follow along, but respond with all the knowledge and wisdom that we hold. And that's, I think, our biggest task. I really think the arts especially has that reciprocal relationship, and just that we've talked about mirroring back and forth. So how do we get kids to play with us and adults? And that change can, I think, begin to happen.
Yeah, Lindsay, I think that there's something in the intersection of what both of you just said, right? The question of how do we make these kinds of impacts long lasting and enduring? We have, over the past year at HundrED, released our position papers that are really trying to understand the nitty gritty, the theory and the mechanics of what it means for an innovation to scale, for it to move on. And in previous episodes, we've also had conversations about what the different aspects of scale are. But one of the things that has been interesting to come to terms with, and it also speaks to what you were talking about, Naqiya, about how understanding what your sphere of influence is. You're not going to be able to have a community where every single person is engaged. And similarly, when you make a change, you're not going to get everybody to come along. There's going to be 5, 10, 15% of people who are going to do things the way that they've always done it, because maybe for them it works, or maybe for them they just can't find a reason to change. But what we can do is make sure that we are setting things up so that when the next generation, the children who are already here, that we're already affecting, they see that that center of mass has shifted a little bit. But even if your innovation is one that is as joyful, is as centered on creating and making beauty in a world where it can be hard to find, the process of innovation and the process of making that change is fundamentally not one that is joyful. And that's why it's a hard slog. It's what we've talked about over and over. It can be isolating. It can be a place where you don't know if it's going to make a difference because you can't see that difference 20 years down the line. And so that's why it's important to have spaces like this where we can come together and have these conversations and understand that Annette has this question, but so does Naqiya, and so do all of us. There is no easy answer other than let's keep working on it together and bringing in the families, the parents, the students, the teachers, and the innovators together. I didn't mean to go on a rant.
It was perfect, and I really agree. So thank you, Alex.
And what Lindsay said, thank you, Lindsay, for bringing this up. And this is something that I try to force myself every single day, that like people in an office or wherever we are trying to think for the children. And we think like, this could be good for them. This could be amazing for them. And then we know that they know best. We do know it. But often we just forget because of our enthusiasm, because of our love for them. And then having to make that shift, you have to really train your brain to not think for them, but to ask them, to involve them, to just by asking them, they will be engaged because they feel so seen and heard when you ask them those big questions like, how do you feel about that? What are your ideas? And then we should listen to them without judgment, without putting our own agenda on them, because they might have completely different ideas. So thank you, Lindsay, for bringing that up, because it's like, I'm thinking about how we can make change, like, but my goodness, I forgot about the children. I'm talking about the parents, talking about the educators, like, no, the magic triangle, right? Between the educator, the parents, and the child. If you leave one angle out, it's not a magic golden triangle anymore. So let's listen to those children because they are the experts. It is about them, it's for them. Thank you for bringing that up, reminding us.
On that note, Annette, I am, and sorry, Naqiya, this is like group therapy. And I think that's the whole thing. We're all interviewing each other and kind of just having this discussion. So one of the things, one of the things I really love about the 100 Summit that was held in Helsinki every year is the fact that you've got youth ambassadors there speaking on behalf of young people, often teenagers, etc. And my question is, how do you take that even further? And you get younger voices of even younger kids to be on that stage. So I don't know how exactly we'll get a 3-year-old to do a keynote. We'll think about that. But not only a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old in early learning, but also 3 years and 4-year-olds from parts of Africa and the Middle East and places. So just that idea of bringing the full demographic representation of the child's voice. And that, I guess, is where a parent, I'm a mum of a 5-year-old, I can be his voice in the world and bring his perspective in if I'm a conscious and listening and dialoguing parent. And so, yeah, I want to extend that invitation to HundrED as we go forward and continue to grow, is to bring all those various little voices in, because I really love that about HundrED and the summit.
Yeah, this year's summit was the first year that we've been really able to integrate youth voice in that way. That was something that us that were organizing it thought was really important. And, you know, we always have high expectations for everybody in our community because it's a community full of incredible folks. But these young people that came forward really blew us away. I think all of us remember. I still think regularly about the speaker who said that the children whose futures we're working to build are already here, right? And I have been holding that in my heart since then. So I think we need to turn it to our final question. So I will go ahead. Naqiya, we always end these conversations with a look to the future and what our dreams for the future of education are. So what do you see in the future for education?
I think I should be more prepared for this one. For me, I want to see a world in which the arts and play are really prioritized in education, and that they're not seen as extra, but as a fundamental part of how we teach and how we heal and build stronger communities, because I really believe that they have the power to do that. And I want to live in a world where every child has the opportunity to experience the arts, and to express themselves, so that they are building these foundational skills that we've been talking about throughout this podcast. And I believe we can get there. We just need enough people like the six of us here working and advocating for that change. And we need to continue, as you've all just said, listening to the voices of the children that we're aiming to support to create that world.
Thank you so much, Naqiya. We could talk for hours. I would love to just hang out with you and our friends here.
I know. I also feel shortchanged because I want to learn more about everyone else's work.
Yeah, I know. We all have so much to share. We have so much to ask. And that's why we are here together, right? To learn from each other, to think with each other, to grow with each other. And in order to create this world in which all human beings can flourish in life. That is like what we aim for. So thank you for today. And we can't wait to catch up next time again.
Amazing. Thank you all for being such generous hosts and asking such poignant questions. I've really enjoyed this experience.
Do you have an education innovation you want to share with the world? The call for the 2026 Global Collection is now open. Apply at HundrED.org.